All right, hello everyone. So I'm going to give you a little presentation on my honors project that I did in Amy's class this semester. It was basically an honors option, which is a way for you to get honors credit through a major class by creating a project or some kind of research that is related to the course content that furthers your knowledge or skills in that course area. So my project for this semester was basically diving into ADHD in the music classroom in the context of middle school ensembles and what that looks like in the real world. What is the experience of kids with ADHD, and how do we come up with teaching strategies to help those kids to be successful in the music classroom? All right, so I had a bit of a three-step process here. So I started out by doing some research on what the presence of ADHD is in academia. I mean, I obviously have my own experience, but in terms of young adolescents, I kind of researched that a little bit and how that affects students specifically in music ensembles. So knowing all of the things about what students experience in academic settings in general, how would that relate to music? And then I did my practical observations with Mrs. Morasco at Montevideo, and she disclosed to me what kids had 504s and IEPs, just so I could kind of observe that on a deeper level and see what that really looked like in a middle school band classroom. And then I kind of brainstormed and researched some ideas on how to come up with teaching strategies for these students. How do we meet these students in the middle? So the higher level kids in the class who maybe are neurotypical and have no problem learning or cause no disruptions. So we aren't lowering their standards, but we aren't expecting too much of kids who may not be able to meet the standard that those kids are meeting. So I'll dive into some research first and kind of give you some background. Okay, so first of all, what is ADHD? So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. It's basically an ongoing pattern of inattention or hyperactivity in someone for a long period of time. And this is most commonly diagnosed in childhood. It's most commonly diagnosed in boys, just because boys typically exert the symptoms of hyperactivity as opposed to inattention. So it's not necessarily more common in boys, it's just more commonly diagnosed. Girls tend to exert symptoms of inattention more commonly than hyperactivity, so it's not as observable. And ADHD is a spectrum. This is something that a lot of people don't understand about ADHD. You have inattention on one side, hyperactivity on another, and then so some people lean all the way inattentive, and so let me backtrack. There are three types of ADHD. There's inattentive, there's hyperactive, and there's combined type. So that I see as a spectrum. So you have inattention on one side, you have hyperactivity on the other side, and then the middle is combined type. So I personally am combined type, so that means I exert symptoms of both hyperactivity and inattention. But people can fall anywhere on that spectrum. Like I said, boys tend to be more hyperactive, girls tend to be more inattentive, but it's different for everybody. So everybody's experience with ADHD is completely different. And so then moving on, what is the experience of adolescents with ADHD in academic settings? So school is really hard for kids with ADHD in every single way, in a lot of ways that people don't see. So ADHD is persistent throughout childhood and into adulthood. It doesn't necessarily improve as kids get older. It can actually worsen as academic challenges intensify. So when kids get to middle school, when they get to high school, and they start to have a lot more assignments that are more difficult and require more mental energy, more accountability, it gets really difficult, and it can cause a lot of self-esteem issues. It can be really disheartening to be struggling in school. Test scores, standardized test scores and grades are statistically lower for kids with ADHD compared to kids without ADHD, and they're less likely to pursue higher education as well. They may have a more stressful family experience just because of their neurodivergence. They may struggle at home, and that can bleed into their school experience as well. And a lot of kids with ADHD are bullied, and bullying is statistically shown to produce lower academic achievement, while socioemotional health leads to higher academic achievement. So we want to really prioritize good socio-emotional health in our classrooms. Students with ADHD struggle with homework a lot. That's something that's really, really difficult. The symptoms laid out in the DSM-5 manifest as problems managing school materials and meeting deadlines. So things like messy workspaces, forgetting and losing school supplies and assignments, showing up late, procrastinating. all things that look like kids are lazy, but they're really just struggling with executive function, getting the things done, getting there on time. So a lot of those symptoms just are very obvious through academic settings. And that can lead to a lot of really bad feelings about school. It can lead to frustration with themselves and low self-esteem, feeling like they can't accomplish anything, feeling like wasted potential. It's a really difficult experience for a lot of kids with ADHD in school. So then with my observation, this was actually pretty interesting. It's not really quite what I expected. But basically, Mrs. Morosco just told me which students had 504 plans and IEPs. She didn't tell me details of those, so what their accommodations looked like or anything like that. Just laid out, okay, this kid has a 504, this kid has a 504, etc. So then I could kind of observe those kids more closely and see what their experiences were in that class, just based on my perspective. So because I said ADHD is super common in young boys, I could kind of safely assume that a lot of these kids, just on my observations of their behavior, had ADHD. It's extremely common, even if it's not diagnosed. But about half the class had 504s or IEPs, which I found really surprising because you wouldn't really expect that. It was a class of about 25 kids, and seeing that about half of them had some kind of accommodations, it's really interesting and good to know as a future teacher. So some things that I noticed, about half the percussion section had 504s or IEPs, and they were mostly boys, and they were very, very hyperactive. I mean, they were hitting things. Mrs. Roscoe told them or showed them how to hit the bass drum right, and they just kept doing that. There was one kid who just wouldn't stop hitting the drum with his sticks, and that's something that I noticed, but they were still very engaged. Mrs. Roscoe had a really, really good control over the classroom at all times. A lot of physical movement was involved. She was moving around the room. Kids were moving around the room. I also worked with the percussionists individually. Well, I worked with the group of percussionists, just me, about 6 of them, and we learned how to play flams, which was really fun. But I noticed that even just working with them, there were kids who I knew had 504s or IEPs who were just very, very disruptive, not necessarily in a negative way, but I could just tell that they were very, they're holding in a lot of energy that they really wanted to get out. And the physical movement really helped with that. Being able to hit a drum helped with that, but it was definitely harder to keep these kids engaged than the other kids who were just standing there listening. But for a lot of kids too who had 504s or IEPs, it wasn't very noticeable. She told me that there were certain kids in the room who had accommodations, but they didn't seem to show any kind of disruptions. They were kind of just acting as normal. And like I said, I don't know what these kids' accommodations were or what their situations looked like. So they could have had something completely different from ADHD or any kind of learning disability. But there was definitely a presence of hyperactivity in the classroom that I could observe. So now we're going to jump into some teaching strategies for kids with ADHD. And these are definitely situational. And in your future classroom, you're going to have to kind of come up with strategies that fit the kids in your room, because you may have a lot of kids in your room with accommodations that look totally different from what I experienced or what I've researched. Every kid is different. Every kid falls in a different spot on that spectrum, like I mentioned before. So it really depends on what kind of kids you have in your classroom and what your resources are, what your abilities are, what your skills are to teach these kinds of kids. But I can lay out a few just to start. So competence. So it's human to want to feel like you are able to accomplish the task at hand. So think, if you're practicing something, if you're practicing an excerpt that you know really, really, really well, you're going to feel better about doing it. If you're practicing something that you don't know as well, but you feel like you may not be able to accomplish, you're not going to have a good time. So for kids with ADHD in the classroom, this is really, really important. Kids being able to, or feeling like they are able to accomplish the task at hand, is going to make them much better off, and it's going to prevent disruptive behavior, hyperactive behavior, impulsivity, blurting things out. So instead of acting reactively to those situations and disciplining kids for being disruptive, you have to think kind of proactively. Okay, am I giving this kid a task that may be too difficult for them? But that also, you have to find balance between challenging your kids and giving them something that you know they're able to accomplish. So it's all about competence, a kid knowing that even if this is a challenging task, if they're competent enough to do it, if they feel as though they can do it, they're going to be better off. They're not going to want to escape that situation by being disruptive. So another one is physical movement. We know that this is beneficial for every kid in the classroom, pretty much no matter what. So physical movement is really, really good for hyperactive kids too. Channeling their excessive energy through something that is positive is really important. So every behavior, every physical behavior is going to have some kind of implicit message. So they're trying to get active. They're trying to exert this energy in a way that they just have to let it out. But using physical movement in the classroom gets them up and moving, and it allows them to be physical in a positive way. So some examples. We played this rhythm game in Mrs. Roscoe's class at the end of class where we had these bouncing balls, and we would just bounce them to the beat of a song and bounce and catch and bounce and catch. So that got the kids moving. They were all really excited. And also just thinking in things that we have done. If you're in Greg's arranging class this semester, that game at the very end of class that we played with when he would count off a rhythm, and then you have to count a certain amount of beats in your head at the same tempo. And then as soon as you get to the end, you stand up. So that's another thing that can incorporate physical movement into something positive, and the kids feeling as though they're contributing to class in a positive way, even though they're being hyperactive. They're moving around the classroom a lot. And that also allows them to blend into class, not feel like they're being disruptive, and not feel like they're getting in trouble for moving around the class. So the next one, this is just a huge kind of overarching idea, is just understanding. So like I mentioned before, every behavior has an implicit message, whether that's being impulsive in the way that they speak and being mean to their classmates, or if it's getting up and running out of the room, running around the room, hitting things on the desk, or it's just completely zoning out. Everything has an implicit message. So approaching situations with care and not discipline, or feeling like the kid's being defiant in any way, that's going to go a long way. So think about, okay, is this kid coming from a class that may have stressed them out a lot, that they feel like they're not succeeding in? Or what does their family situation look like? What does their home situation look like? Just being understanding and knowing that this kid has a different brain chemistry and a different perspective of the world and themselves is so, so important, and really goes a long way. And as their music teacher, they may end up loving you the most because you are, number one, an outlet for them, but number two, you're the fun teacher. So just understanding their perspective, their experiences, and then going into strategies to help them be successful in class with that information is really important. So next, a binder and folder, binder or folder. This is kind of related to what I had talked about before with homework and materials management. So kids with ADHD really struggle with getting assignments turned in, losing assignments, and losing materials and things like that. And with music, this is definitely apparent. Kids losing their folder, forgetting to bring their music to class. In the class that I taught with Mrs. Roscoe, I taught the flutes and the percussion, and two of the flute players forgot their flutes that day. So this is so common with kids with ADHD. So setting them up for success with a kind of strategy that surrounds their materials is really, really helpful. So having a binder with all of their papers in it, all of their handouts, 3-hole punching all of their music, all their copies, all their forms and everything that they have to take home, and keeping everything in one binder, making sure they put it in that binder before they go home, and making sure that you communicate with the parents as well. This is their binder. Everything is in one place, and as long as I have this with them when they come to class, they're going to be all set. All right, next, deflecting impulsivity. So I listened to a podcast by the ADHD Experts podcast, and Dr. Jerome Schultz, he is on the faculty of the Harvard Medical School. He's a neuropsychologist, and he's written a book about teaching kids with ADHD. He's super, super knowledgeable about this. He gave a lot of really helpful and really clever teaching strategies for kids with ADHD. And that will be these next two. So deflecting impulsivity is the first one. So a lot of kids with ADHD are impulsive in the way that they blurt out things without thinking. So they have no filter. We already know kids have no filter, but with kids with ADHD, it's even more extreme. So you have kids who are blurting things out without thinking, with things that may be offensive or things that may be silly in the classroom setting. And that immediately, a lot of the time, comes with shame and embarrassment. They feel embarrassed that their peers just heard them say that. They feel embarrassed that they just said that. So finding a way to control this in the classroom is really, really helpful. So Dr. Schultz had a couple really good ideas for this. So the first one is when you are about to ask a question and you anticipate your kids with ADHD maybe blurting out the answer before they think, if you just approach it by saying, okay, I'm about to ask a question, and before you give me an answer, you're going to think about it for a minute. And as soon as you're ready to answer, you're going to raise your hand. So that gives the kids time to think. They know they have to think before you even ask the question, before they have a chance to come up with an answer. They know what their directions are, and then they have to think about it, and they know that they are ready to answer when they raise their hand. So they have that time to process the question before their mouth moves, before their brain does. And then another one is think, pair, and share. So if you have kids that have a stand partner, or they're sitting at a table with their group in music class, then ask them a question and saying, okay, talk to your stand partner about this, and then we'll share as a class, or talk to your group about this, and we'll share as a class. That kind of acts as a buffer between them and the rest of the class. So if they say something that may be impulsive, or they're just blurting something out that maybe they didn't think before, there's that kind of delay between them and the class, so that the entire class isn't hearing it at first. It's just the person that they're talking to. And you can move around the room and you can kind of listen to pairs talking, so you can kind of get an idea of what they're talking about, or what their answers are, what their thoughts are, before allowing them to just blurt it out in front of the class. And this is all out of care for these kids who they may think they have the right answer immediately, but even if they blurt out something that's close to the right answer, they may still be embarrassed just by the act of blurting something out before they were directed to. So this helps to deflect that. And then a chance to shine. I love this one. This is by far my favorite. I think this is so clever. A lot of kids who are hyperactive and impulsive also, they want to be on stage all the time. They want to be the center of attention. This may come with the message, okay, I'm not the center of attention at home, or I feel like people don't appreciate me in class. I feel like I'm a disruption. I want to be the center of attention in a positive way. So finding a way to help these kids to shine, and let their impulsivity and their hyperactivity be something positive. His idea was to allow these kids to give one joke a day, or tell one joke a day. So if you have a kid in your class who's super hyperactive, he's always up and moving around, always blurting things out, trying to disrupt class, say, okay, you're allowed to tell one joke a day. So go home and talk to your parents and come up with a joke. And then tomorrow you get to come in, and I'll give you a minute at the beginning of class to tell your joke. And they can do that every single day. So that gives them that chance to take center stage and have that moment to shine, and allow that energy to be channeled into something positive, where they are a positive center of attention instead of a negative center of attention like they may be in their other classes if they're being disruptive. And then limiting distractions. This is really more for the kids who are inattentive. Limiting distractions as in just all kinds of distractions around the room, in their visual line of sight, at their desk. Kids who are inattentive can just zone out really, really easily and just focus on something that's at their desk that they're fidgeting with, or be looking out the window daydreaming. And this neuropsychologist on this podcast had also talked about how he had been at the school in Colorado. They just opened up this new school, and the windows had this beautiful view of the mountains, but all the kids were getting distracted by the mountains, so they had to put up curtains. And kids with ADHD, they're just going to be staring at those mountains, daydreaming, fidgeting, not listening to anything you're saying. So limiting those distractions, allowing them to just have what's on their desk is what is for class. If it's in terms of instruments, you have kids who are fidgeting on their instruments, and I guess in the context of percussion tech, you could say, okay, everybody put your sticks up tacit, so that their sticks are not hitting their drum. They know that they have to be in a quiet position, and limiting things on their stand that they can be playing with. So that's all really important, keeping kids engaged and focused just by limiting those small distractions. And then stress management. Stress management is so important for kids with ADHD. It's important for every kid, but stress can be so just so difficult for kids with ADHD. So this is something that I think is really important. Mindfulness, practicing mindfulness meditation at the beginning of class. If you have 5 minutes to take and just put on calming music and zone in and just, calm those thoughts and lead a little meditation, like, okay, we're gonna, anything that is in our minds from anything that we've done so far today, we're just gonna forget about it. We're going to let it go, and we're going to be present in the moment in band. That is so, so important. Another thing is yoga. I did yoga about a year and a half ago, and it is something that really, really benefited me specifically just with the way my brain works. It was the only time, an hour every other day where I could actually quiet my brain. So if you have the time and the resources and the kids to be able to do yoga for 5 minutes in the beginning of your class, that is so, so beneficial. So stress management and anxiety management, that all kind of contributes to a kid's experience in class. If they feel like they're going to music class and that is a place for them to have fun, be creative, have an outlet, make music with their friends, and have a good time and feel valued and feel accomplished, that is what is the most important thing with kids with ADHD. So that is all I have for you, and I really hope that you appreciated these teaching strategies and this information. I really hope you take this with you to your future classroom, and if you have any questions about my presentation, about my research, feel free to message me through Canvas, or I'm sure a lot of you have my phone number and email. You can just shoot me a message. All right, thank you so much, and thank you so much to Amy for helping me out with this project this semester and allowing me to do this. It really, really means a lot. All right, bye guys.